Hello, and thank you for joining Helaman's Army today. I know that in the last video I said that I was going to read through the General Conference talk given by J. Reuben Clark in October 1942. However, I lied. And I'm repenting of my lie, and I'm telling you straightforward, I'm confessing I lied. I messed up. So instead of actually talking about this video, I'll talk about it next video. I thought it would be good to go through this video and just go do the characteristics of the law of consecration. So I went through all of the chapters again, and I looked for just specific characteristics that I could pull out, and I put the references right next to them. But I know I did not get all of the characteristics, and I know that I did not get all of the references. So this is really an incomplete list, but it's a pretty decent list given how many scriptures there are. So I'm just going to run through it real quick. There are characteristics of the law of consecration that we know that have to be in place. Otherwise, it's not the law of consecration. So there are certain economic ideologies that do not jive with the law of consecration, that cannot exist with the law of consecration. Specifically, I'm talking about socialism and communism. They are designed and implemented in such a way that they cannot exist with the law of consecration, because they violate some of the main characteristics of the law of consecration. So just to run through the main points here is that the law of consecration is organized. I've got 5 different references there that reference that it's organized. However, I know that there's more out in there. There's just 5 that I put in there. Consecrated to the bishop, I only have 1 reference put in there, but I know that there's more. So law of consecration is organized. We consecrate all of our things to the bishop. The bishop doesn't manage the storehouse. It's managed by an agent, and then we are also agents unto ourselves, which is a steward. So there's 2 different types of agents. I combined them into one, probably not the best idea, but I combined them into one. So the storehouse is managed by an agent, and then our stewardship, we are agents to our stewardship. But the stewardship is a whole separate thing. I'll get to it when I get down there. One of the main points of the law of consecration is that we remember the poor, that we are imparting our substance unto the poor. Doctrine and Covenants, I've got 4 different references there. And then the covenant, it's done through a covenant and a deed. So the covenant being that a covenant is a promise, and it's a covenant between you and another individual and God. And so it's not just the state coming in and taking over and owning everything. There is a deed. In other words, when you are given your inheritance, or you're given your substance, or you're given your stewardship, you're given a deed. You're given personal, private ownership of that stewardship. You're going to impart your substance unto the poor. Substance is set apart for the poor. That's 3 different. I've got 3 different references in the Doctrine and Covenants for those. I know there's more in there that I probably missed. Once something is consecrated to the church, it cannot be taken back. Like, you gave it to the church, it's consecrated. It can't come back to you. That's part of it being consecrated. It is no longer yours. It is no longer your decision what to do, what needs to be done with it. The properties or substance are in excess of need, are considered residue, and are consecrated. So this one is really important, and I think because this is the way that I understand the law of consecration, and there's so many different interpretations of the law of consecration, I'm not actually going to share my personal thoughts and insights into the law of consecration until after I've presented all of the church resources that I can on the law of consecration, and then I'll do a video saying this is the way I see that it works. This is the way I interpret it, or I envision it, and that's just going to be a complete opinion video. So as of right now, I'm not going to share that, but I will say that I believe that this is extremely important, that there's a difference between residue and like residue income and regular income. And if you do a budget regularly, you'll probably understand what I'm implying there. But again, I'll dive into that later. So a stewardship, this is a big part of the law of consecration. And I kind of broke it down into 4 different things, that we have a stewardship of property, a stewardship of substances, a stewardship that is an inheritance, and then there is, at one point, mentioned a stewardship of revelations. So there's a stewardship of the gospel. So these are all things that need to be imparted, that we need to consecrate. So there's lots and lots of references on stewardships that talk about property, substance, inheritances, revelations, and our stewardship is more than just temporal. So the law of consecration is regularly looked at as a temporal law, but it is not. It is a little bit temporal. It's only a small bit temporal, in my opinion, and it's far more spiritual and far more compassionate than anything else. The temporal side is actually fairly small in the way I view it. So I'll dive into that later in the later video that I discussed earlier. God consecrates the storehouse to the poor. So we consecrate our residue, whether that's residue property, residue income, residue substance of whatever it is. We consecrate that, and then God turns around and it's God consecrating that, the storehouse, to the poor. All right. Participants are to obey God's commandments. There's multiple verses on that. I only wrote down 4, but there's more than 4. There's actually quite a few on that. A deed that shall secure unto him his portion. Okay, this is private property ownership. It's required in the law of consecration that private property is given and respected. Honesty is required. Doctrine and Covenants 51:9. The storehouse agent is appointed by the voice of the church. So yeah, if the agent is the same with every other church calling. A name is given as someone who should be the agent, and then it would be voted upon by the voice of the church. And if there's anyone that says, no, I don't want this guy doing that, then they would be out. Or there would be the process that they would have to work through to get to that point. But the point is that even though there's somebody appointed to be the agent, that the voice of the church still holds a lot of sway. Accountable to God. You are accountable to God with your stewardship in the law of consecration. And this is made really clear throughout all the scriptures. I think I wrote down 6. I got 6 references here. There's far more than 6. I only wrote down 6 of them. We have to enter into the law of consecration willingly. That's in Doctrine and Covenants section 70, verse 14. All things equal. This one is really fascinating to me because it's not equal the way we view equal today. When we see equal, we say you get $1, I get $1, they get $1, this person gets $1. That's how we see it as equal today. There are many examples which show that that's not what equal actually means. So for instance, and I mentioned this in video number 1, Newell K. Whitney got his mercantile. That's great. Oliver Cowdery and another gentleman got the printing press as their stewardships. So that doesn't necessarily mean that I get a stewardship, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I get a mercantile. That would be equal. That would be equal as we view it today. I don't believe that's what that means. I believe it's more of an equal opportunity to tend to our stewardships, and that stewardship is an equal opportunity to supply a living for our families, so that we can then have enough to give residue back in. And I'll dive into that more in a later video. And then Doctrine and Covenants 85:3. I've thought about this verse a lot. And a matter of fact, I don't have it pulled up, but I'm going to pull it up because I think it's important to go over this, because this is one of those verses that is, I talked about it in my last video and I said, oh man, I may have misinterpreted that. And I think I kind of somewhat did, but at the same time, it's kind of an odd. So section 85 in the Doctrine and Covenants, as soon as I get it pulled up here, we're talking about people who leave the law of consecration, who stop living the law of consecration, and the consequences of no longer living the law of consecration. Let me switch this to Doctrine and Covenants section 85. Oh, look at that. Not that's not what I wanted. I get some behind the scenes look of how this works. Behind the scenes here. So law of consecration. Let's get that. Oops. 85. And then we'll just pull it this way. Okay. So 85 verse 3. So this is kind of an odd scripture. It's just kind of odd the way it's talked about, because they're talking about people who choose not to live the law of consecration, or who no longer receive their inheritance by consecration. So this is an instruction verse that shares. It's talking about people who don't do this, but it also shares information about what the law of consecration is within the verse. So it is contrary to the will and commandment of God that those who receive not their inheritance by consecration. In other words, in verse 2, they're talking about the apostates who apostatize after receiving their inheritances. So it's the commandment of God that those who receive not their inheritance by consecration. So now we switch into what consecration is. Okay, consecration is, the law of consecration is agreeable to His law, meaning that it's agreeable to the commandments of God, which God has given. And He gave this law that He might tithe His people to prepare them against the day of vengeance and burning. Okay, so this is a description of what is the law of consecration right here, and then it's kind of like surrounded or encapsulated with this people who are apostatized, who no longer get this, but we're talking about why, about them no longer receiving their inheritance and their names no longer enrolled with the people of God. So this is one of those verses that's a teaching verse, but it's also a people who don't do this don't deserve this verse. So I pondered over this quite a bit over the last few days, and what I came down to, let me go back. Hopefully, I'm not going to redo everything on this one again. I'm just going to pull it up, and hopefully you can see it without. Yeah. So here, tithing is an important feature of consecration, of the law of consecration. I better just the law of consecration. So tithing, even though we're consecrating all of our time, talents, energy, substance, properties, inheritances, all that stuff, we're consecrating everything. We're given back as stewardship. We still pay tithing on that stewardship. At least that's the way I see it, and at least that's the way I gather it. So there's still a tithing that's paid. That doesn't mean that tithing itself is complete in the law of consecration. It means that tithing is an important feature of the law of consecration. We have to pay tithing. So I know that this is kind of a heavy subject, and I'm going to stop scrolling back and forth to make you all dizzy. I know this is a heavy subject, and I've probably missed a few things. I know that I'm probably not like getting everything that you're probably thinking about. And there's probably people out there that might be screaming at me, being like, oh, you should add this or that. Please leave a comment and I'll discuss it. My point is to set a baseline of what is the law of consecration. What are some of the characteristics? What are some of the things we can look to and say, is this from God or is it not? There are, and when I say economic ideologies, I'm specifically talking about socialism and communism. However, occasionally capitalism does fall into the same boat, where it's not from God. But capitalism falls into that boat because of the iniquity of the people, not because of its inherent design. Socialism and communism, by their just inherent design, fall into that category. Because I can go through the same list and think about socialism and communism, and I can say, yes, yes, no, 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 no. So is socialism and communism organized? Yep, it is, because somebody always takes over and becomes the main decision maker, or the one who dictates to everybody how things should be done, or as we would normally call them, a dictator. They don't consecrate everything to the bishop. So that's a no. They're not managed by an agent, and we are not agents unto ourselves. So that's kind of a no. Well, you could make an argument that they're managed by an agent, but it's very clearly not that the people are agents unto themselves. That's definitely a no. Remember the poor. That's the guise in getting people to swallow that socialism and communism pill, but that's not the end result. The fruits of socialism and communism make that very clear. Covenant and a deed? Nope. No way. There's no way that there's a covenant and a deed with socialism and communism. In part of your substance unto the poor, substance is set apart for the poor. Again, that's the guise. That's what gets people to say, "Oh, it's gonna be so good. We're all gonna be equal." The substance is not necessarily set apart for the poor. Matter of fact, I guess you could say, well, yeah, it is, because everyone becomes poor under socialism and communism. We don't all become more and more wealthy and more and more better off. We become more and more poor. So you could make the argument that the substance is set apart for the poor. It's just, how do you get there? Once it belongs to the church, it cannot be taken back. You could say that once it belongs to the state, it cannot be taken back. I would say that would be very similar, but not the same. Properties or substance that are in excess of need are considered residue and are consecrated. In socialism and communism, you'd be really lucky to have any residue. And the fruit of that spirit, the fruit of that socialism and communism not having residue, is clear throughout the history of socialism and communism. Stewardship. There is no stewardship in socialism and communism. There's no private ownership. There's no property ownerships. There's no substance ownerships. There's no inheritance ownerships. There's no revelations that are stewards. There's no gospel which you're a steward of. Socialism and communism are renowned for cutting God out of the mix completely. So God, therefore, cannot consecrate the storehouse to the poor in socialism and communism. Participants are to obey God's commandments. Quite the opposite. The Communist Manifesto makes it clear that God is not to be even invoked, not to be even as part of the idea. A writing or a deed that shall secure unto him his portion. Nope. There's no private property. Socialism and communism. Honesty is required. Oh, quite the opposite. Honesty is not required. It is the opposite. You need to be dishonest in order to survive in socialism and communism. Storehouse agent appointed by the voice of the church. Nope. No. I mean, they kind of make it that way. They're like, hey, everyone come out and vote. And you go out to vote and you vote for one person. You have one option. So, yeah, they can say it, that we... just like North Korea, they can be like, yeah, everyone voted for me. No, they didn't. And the people who didn't vote for you got rounded up and got thrown into prison. Accountable to God. Nope. That's not a part of socialism or communism. Enter into the law of consecration willingly. There are some people who enter into socialism and communism willingly, but not everybody. There are a lot of people who live under socialism and communism begrudgingly or by force. Matter of fact, it is usually fully enacted and enforced by force. All things are equal. They make it sound like that. I mean, socialism and communism, that's how they sell it. Everything's going to be equal. You get $1, I get $1. And when I say equal, I mean the equal that we talk about, versus the equal that was exemplified in the Doctrine and Covenants, where Newell K. Whitney was given a stewardship of his mercantile. Well, not everyone got a mercantile. Not everyone got not everyone got the printing press. Not everyone got the stewardship over the Book of Mormon. Not everyone got stewardship over the Revelations. There are certain things that you're given stewardship over. So what does equal actually mean? Is it equal as in socialism and communism, or is it equal as in equal opportunity, equal as in equal potential? I think that's what it really comes down to. And then, of course, there's no tithing in socialism and communism. You make it, you give it to the state. So this is just a quick overview of the characteristics of the law of consecration in the Doctrine and Covenants. I know I missed some. I know that there's things that should be added, maybe some things that I could have done a little better on. But this is just a really basic list of things. And one of the things I know I missed was that sharing the gospel. We have a stewardship. We have a stewardship of the gospel. So therefore, we have a stewardship to share the gospel. We have a stewardship to impart the gospel to those who are poor in the gospel. That's the law of consecration. That's part of the law of consecration. Anyway, so that's what I've got for today, for now. And the next video, I will follow up with the J. Reuben Clark talk from October 1942, discussing what is the law of consecration. And this is my message today, and that I know that the law of consecration is God's law, and it is not the fake and false counterfeits of socialism and communism, that this really is the way that things are done, and that it is willingly, it is honestly done without any begrudgingly whatsoever. And I have reading through all these verses, I've really formed a very solid opinion about what it is and how we implement it, or how we can implement it today without the church actually officially practicing the law of consecration. I think there's a way we can do it personally, individually. And so this is just, I'll share that video later. But I just want to share this, and I hope that this is enlightening and at least somewhat thought-provoking, or at least get you to consider the possibility of what the law of consecration really is versus what people think it might be. And I give you this message in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.